Hello, and thank you for joining us today. We are very lucky to have a special guest today. Ben Cort is here from Colorado, and Ben is an expert in the field of marijuana, THC, cannabis, and yes, there is a difference. So I have learned that already. But we just wanted to have a short conversation about some of the community impacts that we're learning about as we have just legalized marijuana in Montana in the last 2 years. So Ben, thank you for coming and joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Always great to come to Billings.
Yeah. So I opened with cannabis, THC, and marijuana, all really very different things.
Yeah. Okay. So cannabis and marijuana, I might put in the same category. Marijuana is an interesting word with some roots that were pretty specifically anti-Latino. So most people prefer cannabis, but cannabis is a plant. Marijuana would be synonymous with cannabis as a plant. THC is a chemical in that plant, specifically the part of the plant that gets one intoxicated.
Great. So when we talk about this and we talk about the impacts, we're really not talking about our grandfather's 1970s joint that he was smoking, I guess is where I'll go with this. What's being used currently is really a completely different product than maybe what we think about from the 1970s.
Perfect word and product. But no, not only are we not talking about grandpas, we're not talking about dads or even mine. I'm in long-term recovery myself, so haven't used anything since June 15th of 1996. But even what I used back in the 90s has absolutely antiquated. So when we talk about the plant versus the product, the language is very important here, because what we've always consumed, grandpa, dad, me, great-grandpa, ancient doctors in Asia, what they've always consumed and interacted with was the plant. We now are dealing with the products that are given to us by an industry driven by profit.
Mm-hmm. So in Billings, we have marijuana stores in our county, and what are they selling?
They're selling products. It's funny, you'll always, when you turn on the news or you see pictures of it, you almost always see somebody handling an actual plant, like organic material. Mm-hmm. Nobody's keeping track of these data, so we certainly can't say with authority, but if we base Montana on every other state that there is, in all likelihood, a majority of the products that are being sold by value are cannabis concentrates. Certainly different forms of edibles make up a huge component of it, but a smaller portion of those two is the organic material, is what maybe you or I at our age would think of as pot, as weed.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about that, we're really talking about the potency, right? About THC has become a different potency than what it was when it was just being smoked as a plant. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So not only has the plant increased in potency pretty rapidly, and in some ways kind of in astounding ways, it's increased from averages being in the 10 to maybe 15% to, it's hard to say averages now because we don't really do that so much in the same ways, but high points going just over 40% THC in a plant. But that's not the story. The story is the THC potency in the products. It doesn't matter what's in the plant. It just takes a little more organic material to create the product. The products being presented and sold in your dispensaries and Billings and all over Montana will go up to 99.9% pure THC.
So can we use the example, I saw you talk earlier about a lot of people are thinking about edibles and they're thinking about the gummies. That seems to be really popular right now. And your example was really shocking when we started to talk about per serving in a gummy. So tell me about, we think one gummy, one serving.
Yeah.
Not true.
Oh no, you can have multiple servings inside of a single package. Mm-hmm. The most extreme examples I've seen have been 100 legal servings inside of something the size of a graham cracker, or even the most audacious was a cake pop, like the thing you would buy at the coffee shop. So yeah, right now we got a very big problem in that people can put multiple servings in one package. Should be a really simple solution. We would just need lawmakers to be willing to take a stand against lobbyists.
Mm-hmm. So I want you to hold that thought because we're going to go with what can we do about this at the end. We'll kind of take our three things. So the next thing I really want to talk about is how dangerous this is for our children. I mean, we grew up in an era where if somebody was smoking the plant, it maybe didn't affect them too much. We're hearing about a lot of young children or teenage children having almost psychosis in the sense when they're using this newly developed product that has THC in it. What is going on there?
Well, I'm going to challenge it just a little bit that it's not just dangerous for the children.
Sure.
Certainly from a brain development standpoint, we are much more concerned with the brain development in a child or an adolescent. However, some of the issues that we're seeing associated with this, biological instead of just mental, are really concerning for adults, in particular older adults. And that considers things like spikes in blood pressure, spikes in heart rate, things that, now at our age, we need to be more concerned with that than we do with the brain development. For the young people, what we see is a considerable increase in their risk of developing psychosis, which, if you'll remember, it's just a grab word for all forms of mental illness, like a generic word for it. We certainly fear that in adults, and we see quite a bit of it going on in adults. But the biggest problems that we're seeing with this today really are around mental health, and they are significant. It's there's this big lag between when science can say something with a surety, whatever that is, whether it has something to do with weather or something to do with what we should and shouldn't eat or whatever it is. There's always a big gap between when science says for sure 100% it's that, and then when the public recognizes that truth. And right now we are in the in-between. Right now we can say for sure, scientifically and medically, that this high-potency THC is causing severe mental illness in a lot of people who consume it, and making much worse severe mental illness in way more people. We got a pretty big problem on our hands, and the sooner we recognize it as a society, the sooner we can start to remedy it.
So it's kind of like the perfect storm, because I hear a lot of people talking about the reason our mental health numbers are going up so drastically actually came out of COVID. But what you're saying is, yes, COVID probably did cause some of that, but then the legalization of marijuana also probably is exacerbating that issue. Is that fair?
Oh, certainly. It seems to me that whatever it is you're selling is the root of all evil.
Right. COVID's getting blamed for a lot of things that maybe it didn't do.
The people want to blame COVID. But another interesting thing that happened in COVID was people's use rates went through the roof.
Right.
Overdose rates went through the roof. But then you had people getting treatment and the ability to find treatment dropping. So the thing that I will remind all of your viewers of is that drug policy and drug interaction on any population level, large scale, is exceptionally complex. And there's not an always never with it. But we can say that everything indicates that the problems are getting much worse. And we have tried different approaches over the last decade here, what I will describe as an extreme liberalization of drug laws in this country, all the way up to like the state of Oregon, who made possession and use of any substance legal, and now has since rolled that back. Sure. We have seen a shift in the way we've handled it. As we've said, we need to not punish, we need to basically allow whatever it is people want to do. It hasn't been getting better. So whatever's going on, be it COVID, be it social media, be it weed, be it the different forms of opiates, it's not getting any better. And I'd really like to see some changes on this one issue to see if maybe it'll help some.
So let's talk about when a state like Montana legalizes marijuana. There is this thought that we're going to be rolling in the money because of all the tax benefit that's going to come from that. Similarly to how Montana is always talking about how much alcohol tax money we get, that we're a big state for drinking. And so now we're going to be a big state for THC use, right? and I think the perception when people are voting for that or when there's discussion about it is around, well, it's going to be fine because we're going to have so much tax money that it's, we're going to be able to put people in treatment that are negatively affected by that. What's the reality of that?
Well, the reality is that no one's ever done that, built a robust treatment or even a impotent treatment model around using marijuana taxes. The reality is that we have never come anywhere close to appropriately taxing vice substances in this country to a point where we could hope to reverse some of the damages associated with it. As a general rule, the CDC would tell us that for every dollar we collect in alcohol taxes, it costs our society about 5, and for every dollar we collect in tobacco taxes, it costs our society about 11. We thought we were going to change that. We were going to nail it with weed the first time. Mm-hmm. It was the people who sell the idea, and most importantly, the product. The people who sell the idea are the ones who are going to be selling the products. Of course, they're going to tell you everything's going to be great with taxes. But I challenge you, and everybody in Montana who thought that that would be a real thing, is you drink a lot in this state. Has alcohol tax fixed everything? Like, I mean, all the potholes I'm driving over in downtown Billings, like I believe we have scratch and win and lotto and things like this here. Has this solved all of our issues? The reality is that taxing vice substances can never be done at a rate that will make up for the damage that they cause, be that alcohol, tobacco, gambling, THC.
Mm-hmm. So my next question is always, where's the FDA in all of this? Why isn't this being regulated? Because I think one of the scariest things you say in your public talks is there is no regulation on this federally. And usually we're kind of relying on the FDA to be that backstop that helps us regulate these types of substances. Where is the FDA, and why haven't the feds stepped up and said, hey, we're going to regulate this just like we do with tobacco and alcohol?
Well, the very simple answer to that is that it's a Schedule I controlled substance. And so FDA would be complicit in violating federal law if they played any role in managing it. That's a simple throwaway answer that the politicians are using right now. The real reason is because there's no political willpower to do it. Everybody wants to say, hey, I'm good with weed and I vote tax, regulate, tax, regulate, tax, regulate, but they're not. What they are doing is bowing down to the corporate powers that will be and the gigantic checks that the weed lobbyists are writing to them, and they're just jumping on the bandwagon and letting whatever happens. Now, FDA should be involved because states are not prepared to regulate consumable substances. They haven't had to do it in 130 years. That happens at the federal level. However, since the federal government is currently playing the I don't see you game and just ignoring this entire issue and leaving it to the states, what they're asking is for us at a statewide level to do something that we simply have no infrastructure, experience, or money to do.
So when you were here 2 years ago, I remember having this conversation with you, and we talked about this is probably going to happen, which it did. We did legalize marijuana in the state of Montana. And we asked you at the time, what should we be doing? And you said that we really needed to be looking at potency and also looking at what our infrastructure was within the state for regulations. Yeah. So who's checking on the mom and pop marijuana store? What have you seen as a result of that? So we're 2 years later. Are we regulating it appropriately? And did the state really step forward in Montana, and I'm curious about Colorado as well, because that's usually where we get our information. Did they step forward and start regulating the industry for us?
Simply put, no. There's some cute stuff on the books, but there's no funding or regulatory infrastructure to enforce any of those things. You can say anything you want, but if you don't have a mechanism for enforcement behind saying that, it's worthless. It's meaningless dribble. Write any law you want to on the book, but if there's money to be made by violating that and no one to catch the violator, good luck ever seeing that come to fruition. Now, Colorado's your biggest offender with this, with our marijuana enforcement division. We've sent 2 former heads of our marijuana enforcement division directly to work for multinational THC firms as lobbyists, and one as a CEO. There is not regulation around this that's being enforced. There's stuff on the books, but there's nobody making sure that what people are consuming is appropriate. And I really did have high hopes for Montana with this because you guys think differently. Your politics have always been different. And I still think that there's some stuff that Montana might lead the country in. But no, you missed the boat, like the rest of us, on the regulation.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's always interesting about the marijuana industry is we in Montana think it is the small mom and pop shop that was put in our county for Yellowstone County, and that they're just running a legit business, and they probably are. I mean, under the regulations that we set forth, they probably are. But the truth of it is it still a cash only business? Is that considered?
In theory,
in
sure.
theory, yeah, right. And the regulations. But what you said in Colorado that was the shift was it starts as mom and pop, but eventually becomes corporate.
Oh yeah, absolutely inevitable. The market gets so competitive, and the commodity itself is so easy and cheap to produce that it kind of like the pricing schedule becomes a big issue. So the only way that can really work out for people is to control everything seed to sale, vertical integration. So a small little mom and pop dispensary is not able to produce all of the different products, isn't able to farm the product itself at any sort of meaningful level. So what you end up with is a move towards first it was big national corporations, now it's multinational corporations, and these are multi-billion-dollar, very, very well-heeled, well-lawyered organizations that are now waiting in the wings. So what I believe I told you guys back then, or at least what I'll tell you now, is getting a license initially in a place like Montana, in places where they actually have restrictions on residency, is winning the lottery. Because you'll get it, and like your small dispensary owners now here in Billings and around the state, sure, they're owning it, and they are not part of some larger, giant corporate power that be. These are people in our community, people we know. They will sell to those powers that be, because the license is going to be worth so much more than what they can generate in revenue from the store. So ultimately, that's why every commercial market we have seen to date does end with vertical integration and national and multinational firms.
Mm-hmm. And that's in our future, I assume.
Yes.
We're not quite there yet. I think the other myth that I just learned from you is much of the cannabis, sorry, I was looking for the word, I almost said marijuana. Much of the cannabis is not grown here.
Gosh, no.
See, I think everybody thinks that the cannabis stores actually have a grow operation as well, locally. Mm-hmm. I think there's this myth that it's a Montana-based business, it's a Montana family, they're growing it in Montana, we're a big agriculture culture anyway, and so I think we think that it's really safe and really local.
I wouldn't be surprised if quite a bit of the organic material being sold was grown in state, the flower itself was. Mm-hmm. I would be very surprised if that were safe in any form of the word, from pesticides to growth accelerators to heavy metals, etc. I think that the products are absolutely being imported. I mean, as far as I know, you don't have any large national product manufacturers here. You are surrounded by them, though. There are multiple states around you that have them. Colorado's got the most of them. So yeah, they're importing these things across state lines, which violation of the law, federal law. But it's not surprising. There has always been much more commerce taking place out of the back doors of dispensaries than out of the front doors of them. Even if the plant is being grown in Montana, I'm still always concerned with how it cultivates, because I don't know if you know this or not, or your viewers, but Montana's really cold, and it's got a terribly short growing season, and it's not a place that weed grows naturally. When we think about weed, we think about warm places, Hawaii, we think about Indonesia, we think about rich, rich soil, lots of moisture, lots of heat. Montana's not one of those. So we bring all the grows in-house, and then to keep them moving at the pace we need, lots of growth accelerators and aggressive pesticides.
Right. Okay, so I want to shift gears here to let's talk about how it seems to be a really big problem in our youth right now that they're experimenting with cannabis, THC, but they seem to be using it through vapes. And we hear so much discussion around vaping. And, you know, vaping isn't legal if you're under 18, but that seems to be the choice for how people are ingesting it. What's the theory behind that, and is there anything we can do to prevent that? Because we feel like we have the laws that we need, but yet they're not enforceable.
The way that we got people to stop smoking was we increased stigma associated with it. So vice substances need to have stigma associated with them. It's how we keep everybody from doing them. We need to increase the stigma around vaping to be representative of the actual harms around vaping. Not just nicotine, but certainly THC. So vaping THC, they're all vaping a form of concentrated THC, very unnaturally high potencies. A byproduct of the cannabis plant, an extraction of concentrates are to cannabis what crack is to coca. So it is a refined byproduct of, and that's what's being vaped, 100%. That's what's being vaped, no exceptions. So what we really need to do is start to increase the stigma around that vaping, and like it, in the same way we did with tobacco consumption with cigarettes, like that is not okay, and we should be calling people on it.
So the way that we got through with the cigarettes really came through litigation. So is that where we're headed with cannabis as well? Do we think we would have to go through some litigation process to actually get a campaign, if you will, out of the cannabis companies to say it's dangerous?
Yeah, the Truth Campaign,
Yeah,
which today's youth have grown up on, and they don't smoke cigarettes.
right.
The cigarette manufacturers pivoted to vaping because they weren't losing that market, but the Truth Campaign is funded by the massive class action lawsuits against the tobacco companies. There's an old saying that sometimes it's best to let the wolf kill the fox. And if the lobbyists and the multinational corporations are the wolves, the trial attorneys are the foxes. Reverse that. The lobbyists are the foxes, the trial attorneys are the wolves. So yeah, ultimately I believe this ends in tort, where you'll start to see some real serious regulation. The other thing is going to be in just general public health awareness, in the same way that I grew up seeing the harms and risks associated with tobacco consumption so different than generations ahead of me. The generation now and those coming are growing up in a world where high potency THC is having a dramatic negative effect on people's mental health. And so they're going to know that, and they're going to push for change.
Okay. So one of the reasons you're in Billings right now is there's a group of us, the Mental Health Center, Montana Alliance for Prevention, Upstream Community Prevention, some groups that came together and said, hey, if you'll notice, the common denominator in all of those groups is prevention. So we firmly believe that there is a way to start doing more prevention than what we've been doing. If you were giving us the golden ticket, what prevention should we be doing? Where do you get the biggest bang for your buck in prevention right now?
In prevention, I think it's early childhood education. And I think that early childhood education has to be meant with parental education, because the kids have to be hearing it from all of the folks in authority, parents and us, if you will. And the most important thing for that is that the messaging is actually relevant. The problem we have is most parents, lawmakers, prevention specialists wouldn't know the difference between a concentrate and a plant. And we have to learn what it is we're talking about really well, and then we got to start educating earlier, or else the industry will just continue to craft the message. How we let tobacco do it for every years. 3 out of 4 doctors prefer Camels. We've got to change the message with the young folks and with their parents.
So if I gave you all the money in the world, you could be the most impactful lobbyist in the state of Montana, and I sent you to the legislature, because we only meet every 2 years, so it'd be this coming winter. What legislation would you draw up for Montana so that we would at least change the conversation around cannabis for the state of Montana? What would you do if you had the money and the influence?
I would initiate a THC potency cap. Very simple math.
Mm-hmm. And what number are we looking for? And maybe explain that, because I think it's interesting what the potency used to be, what it is now, and where we are going to negotiate in the middle probably. And has anybody ever done it?
The naturally occurring amount of THC inside of a cannabis plant is somewhere between 0.2 and 0.5% THC, less than half of a percent. The products being sold out of the dispensaries in Billings today are 99.9% pure, up to 99.9% pure. We didn't see any measurable issues associated with cannabis worth talking about until that started to crest double digits in the mid-2000s. So what you basically have, you have very, very simple math. The farther from zero you are, the greater the harm. Simple. I would, if you could follow the science on what a potency ban would be, it would be zero. However, there's not the political willpower to do anything like that. So the next level of following the science would be 8%. You'll have to forgive me, I'm summarizing a lot of science without citing, but it's true. After that, it would be 10%. After that, 16%. But to be very frank with you, when we attempted this in Colorado and it got crushed by every lobbyist in the country who came in on it, I would have taken 90% because it's less damaging than 99%. I would take 80%. My gut tells me that the first state with the actual courage and commitment to do this is going to probably, if you could get it to 30, you'd see a pretty significant reduction in damage.
Mm-hmm. So during this conversation you said Montana's different, and Montana does have a little bit more willpower in a different way than maybe some other states. Could Montana be first in that?
It's been my hope, and I'm not just placating, I'm not saying that because I'm here. When I was here 2 years ago, I really felt that willingness in Billings and the lawmakers in Billings, and I think it could have been something that happened here if they'd have had a little more control over it. I think that your politics are very interesting. You are, at your core, a libertarian people, which are fantastic. Like, be whatever you want to be, but Montana has always been for Montana. Montana went first on the legalization thing. You guys decriminalized cannabis way before anybody else did. Mm-hmm. You've got different laws when it comes to your water. You've got different laws when it comes to your hunting and fishing, certainly than we do. Yeah, Montana, if I had to bet against a group of lobbyists out of D.C., 20 guys in Armani suits coming from K Street in D.C., versus one rancher from Montana, my money's going to be on the cowboy. Yeah, you guys could absolutely be the ones to buck the system.
I think I'm going to end on that, because I think that's a really strong message for everybody to hear, that we do have the ability to change this. You know, you can always learn from what's happened previously. And so I just want to say thank you for coming to see us in Montana again. We're so glad you're here, and you've just been wonderful doing some awareness and education in our community. So thank you, Ben.
Well, it's my pleasure, and the hunting and fishing I've had on the back end has been well worth it as well.
Great. Glad to hear it. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.